Hey everyone, John from Nintendo Life here, and I am not alone. I'm joined by the wondrous Alex Olney.
Hello, yes, it's it's a bit of a chat video, so it would be a bit sad if you were by yourself now, wouldn't it?
Alex, 4 years ago, the Nintendo Switch was revealed to the world, and, almost 4 years ago, it was released to the world, and we've been dealing with the same old UI ever since then. There have been barely any upgrades, we're stuck with the same two themes, there are no folders, and Alex, we're on the verge of two brand new consoles coming out with entirely brand new UIs.
Sort of.
Well, yes, we'll get into that, but it makes the Switch look a little bit behind in some aspects. So what we're going to do today is talk about what we want from the Switch in the future, and whether it can stand head-to-head with the upcoming console UIs. But let's touch on that a moment, because Xbox Series X isn't necessarily getting a brand new UI. It's basically getting an iterative version of the Xbox One UI, and that's also being updated to be the exact same as the Series X UI. So that's not really a next-gen one, but still, it does have features that Switch doesn't have.
Yes, lots, in fact. The Xbox and the PlayStation, I'm just going to refer to it as Xbox and PlayStation for the sake of ease. Read into which console I'm talking about in your own way. But basically, the Xbox and the PlayStation UIs compared to the Switch are significantly more fully featured. They have things like, sort of built-in chat rooms and messaging systems, and they even have their own sort of social thing, which I suppose the Switch does to a degree with the news thing, but that's a bit of a stretch perhaps. They also have ads, which I hate, but they're there. It's a feature. It's something the Switch doesn't have. And as a result, the Switch does feel... I don't even want to say it feels behind, but it feels limited. It feels like there's so much more they could do with it. Like, as you so rightly said, even just bloomin' folders, and it's not like we haven't seen that from a Nintendo system, because we had it with the 3DS and indeed the Wii U in an update. I remember that being quite a substantial day for me. Getting folders on the Wii U, which shows just how exciting my life is.
Yeah, the Switch certainly feels basic compared to the other ones. However, I have returned to the Wii U quite recently, and navigating that home menu takes forever. Booting up the settings in particular can take like 10 seconds, whereas on Switch you just go straight into it. So I think that's kind of the Switch's main strength, is everything is just so snappy. In fact, an influencer showed off a video of Series X going from standby mode to getting back into the game, and it's quick, but Switch is still quicker. I think those aspects where it certainly is lesser in features are kind of made up for with speed.
Absolutely, it's my main counterpoint. You beat me to it already, but how many counterpoints are there? I suppose. It is just, in terms of the UI, it is basic, it is simple, but as a result, it is so efficient, so wonderfully efficient that, as you say, you can just turn it on. I quite often forget that if I'm in the middle of a game of, say, The Witcher 3 or something, I just, put the Switch into sleep mode, and then the next day I can just, turn my Switch on. I'm back in the game. It takes longer for my TV to turn on than it does for the Switch to get back into a game like The Witcher 3. And obviously, that's not the same as loading up from the start. But even so, that's how the games are suspended, and it is that quick. It is painful. In fact, I did actually, ages ago, we found out how ludicrously efficient the Switch's UI is. So I'm going to take a brief moment to pause, and I'm going to find out how much stuff it uses. Back in a tick. Okay, so I've just gone back to a wonderful article on NintendoLife.com, and yeah, the Switch's operating system, in terms of resources when it's active, uses 200 kilobytes.
I suppose it's not really loading anything but images, really. That's more or less it. It's super basic, to a fault in some aspects, but the speed brevity is so good. In fact, I was actually uploading a clip of Tetris Effect from PS4 yesterday, and just clipping the video is kind of cumbersome with their interface, and it takes a lot longer whenever you press the capture button. Like on Switch, as soon as you press capture, the image is taken. On PS4, you press it, you wait a couple of seconds, and then eventually it captures it. I'm sure PS5 is going to improve upon that, but just Switch has PS4 beaten in terms of that at least.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, I never really use the share function on my PS4. Admittedly, I don't play my PS4 as often, but it is just kind of clunky. I don't really fully understand it, and I'm sure if I spent some time with it, I would. Obviously, I would. I'm not suggesting that it's, ludicrously obtuse, but it's just that little bit too sort of cumbersome. Whilst with the Switch, if I want to take a screenshot, I press the screenshot button, and if I want to take a video, I press and hold the button, and then remember that this game does not support video capture. Which I think is arguably a bit of a downside, but at the same time it means that processing power that is constantly taking video can be put towards the game with things like, I'm bringing it up again, The Witcher 3, because it's still mad that that's on the system. But I still think that we can find a happy medium between using maybe 300 kilobytes of data. I don't know.
Whoa, pushing it out there.
I say data, it's resources. We don't know precisely what those resources are, and I don't pretend to know before someone in the comments says that it's RAM or something, because maybe it is. Anyway, but I do think that we could find a happy medium with maybe a new Switch or just an update to the Switch. At the very least, folders.
I can't believe we don't have them. Nintendo have always been slow to add folders, but never this slow. Like when 3DS launched, it didn't have folders, and I'm pretty sure Wii U didn't either. They both came in firmware updates. But they took maybe a year, maybe 2 years. We're nearly 4 years in and there's no sign of folders. It's absurd. They added some kind of organization, like you can filter your games by their title, by their publisher, and I like that, but I don't like that certain games are stuck out of order in their series. So Doom goes like Doom 1, Doom 2016, Doom 2, Doom 3, and then Doom 64 somewhere. I want to put them in release order, but I can't do that. There's no way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to do it in sort of like alpha chronological, for lack of a better term, but
yeah.
you can't realistically expect all of the metadata to match up perfectly with that sort of thing. So I don't know. I mean, of course, this would all be fine if we could just, order it manually and then we could do whatever we like with it, but we can't do that. And I think that is not like a limitation of, it needs to be super snappy. That is just, what is it? It would be like, I suppose, the equivalent of an XML document, which is going to be not even, probably kilobytes in size again. And I mean, realistically, if the Switch is still using that, 200 kilobytes of resources, I think we can suffer 2 or 3 more kilobytes for a small XML document that says what order the games should be in.
Yeah, even on the Wii, you could freely move your channels around. This shouldn't be something that's too complicated. Also, talking about other consoles too, the PS5, strangely, actually takes a step back in certain areas. So on PS4, there are custom themes that you can use, just dependent on whatever you get from the PSN store. But on PS5, it seems that that's actually static to actual just color schemes, so you can't get those free custom themes on there. That may come in a future update, but Series X, on the other hand, is doing a first for Xbox where they do have custom themes. So it seems they've kind of flipped around. But also, Switch doesn't have anything. We just have white and black. That's all. There's a themes option, but it's just those 2 colors. We need more than that.
We do. I mean, I do think that certainly from a sort of a resources point of view, the Switch, I mean, bear in mind the Switch UI only runs at 720p, which is probably another thing that makes it so bloomin' efficient. But when it comes to sort of backgrounds and things like that, people are very quick to say, it's just an image, how big can it be? But if the entire Switch UI is using 200 kilobits of resources, and yeah, there are images of the games on there, but it only ever shows a few at a time from the main Switch home menu, and more if you go into the more games section, or more, I can't remember, is it more games? It doesn't matter. But sort of, if that's using 200 kilobytes of data, to have one big image in the background is actually going to use proportionally a lot of resources, because those images, you're going to want them to be lossless, obviously. You're not going to want JPEG compression in there. It would look horrible. And so as a result, it's going to be, a 720p image, decent variety of colors, like, you know what, I'm going to do another test. Let's pause again. Right, so I've just run some tests and I've created a 1280 by 720 image of, sort of classic bit of key art from Breath of the Wild. I've saved it as a PNG and as a TIFF to give a bit of a comparison. The TIFF comes out at a whopping 2.8 megabytes, which is, 1,000 times the UI? And a PNG, which is another possibility, is 1.5 megabytes, which is not quite 1,000, maybe 700 times at a guess. That's a big difference, actually, isn't it? And I don't want to say that that's the reason that Nintendo aren't doing it, but I think it must be a factor. People often think that images are small these days, and I suppose in today's society they are certainly things like JPEGs and things like that, but they wouldn't be using JPEGs because JPEGs would look awful. They'd need to be lossless, and as a result, it's going to be big. Going to be big. In fact, I'm going to send over those two images for you to plonk in the video.
Well, thank you, Alex.
That's okay. They will look identical.
They can certainly risk bloating the UI too, which is something I think 3DS did. My launch 3DS just runs terribly at the moment. It's got a Dreamcast theme on, and there's icons all over the screen, and just like navigating the UI makes it lag so much. And I don't know if that was an issue with everyone's 3DSs, but specifically the launch ones. They just couldn't handle how much bloat they added into the UI once you've cluttered it with so many icons. And there is a real risk of that happening with the Switch too.
Yeah, and I think also if you start, bigging up the UI further and further, you're taking away resources and processing power and things like that away from the games, which, at the end of the day, the Switch is not some sort of multimedia platform. I mean, I know you can get things like YouTube on there, but it's not that. It is a games console, and Nintendo have been absolutely laser focused on saying it is a games console. It is for games. It is for cardboard as well, but it is for games. And as a result, I can see why they've gone with this philosophy, and I think even though there are some things that I would love to include, I would love to have, as we've said so many times, themes, folders, things like that, and maybe chat rooms or something. That is something that I think would be really, really important. Even if you were to hand it off to the phone app, if we can still believe that thing exists. I still think that those are features that I would like, but would I want them at the cost of not being able to run The Witcher 3 on a system that can use 4 watts? I don't think so.
Yeah, honestly, I don't see the next-gen consoles as being direct competitors, I suppose, in their UIs, because they're doing very different things. They have very different resource management. And for what the Switch does, it does pretty well. I mean, like you said, of course, I'd love a way to message friends on the Switch. Why wouldn't I? But I also don't necessarily see it as something that desperately needs fixing. Sure, I'd love it, but the Switch does what it does pretty damn well at the moment.
Yeah, I don't... sort of at the end of the day, there are things like Discord, which is actually how we're chatting now, hashtag not sponsored. You can use all these things. There are so many options there. There would be a degree of simplicity and convenience if it were in the Switch UI, but at the same time, if it's a feature that isn't going to be used by a majority of players, the minority seem to be perfectly happy with things like Discord, and they've proved that by having the Switch Online app being so awful and nobody really using it for voice chat. I'm sure some people do, but I don't know anyone who actively uses it. Do you?
Probably like Miyamoto, and that's around it.
Yeah, we chat with him occasionally on that, don't we?
All the time, yeah.
Full disclosure, we've never chatted to Miyamoto, or at least I haven't. I can't speak for John.
He's my bestie. Like going into the PS5 though, for instance, there's a lot of features that wouldn't really be possible there on the Switch. Like every single game, when you go over the icon, has this giant display image, and there's also music that plays when you hover over the icon. And that's stuff that I think can only really be done with the higher powered machines, whereas the Switch is essentially a tablet. If you put that next to the PS5, it's going to be dwarfed by it. That thing is so much larger, has so many more components in there. They both do what they can as well as they can, and honestly, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and comparing sizes is something that always interests me between systems, because people will say, oh well, it's only... somebody may well have worked it out and say, oh, the PS4, for example, the PS4 Pro is only, I don't know, 6 times the size of a Switch, or so. I'm just plucking numbers out of the air as an example. But you say it's only 6 times the size of a Switch, but The Switch is, I mean, if you actually take the components out of a Switch that do all the processing and things, it's essentially a system on a chip. I don't think it actually is a system on a chip, but it's bloody close. Like, most of the Switch is taken up with a battery. It's not really fair to compare them in terms of the shell size, because the other consoles are absolutely dwarf the Switch when you actually look at the processing components and things like that, and the GPU, if it even has a GPU, I don't know. I just look at a circuit board in the Switch and I think, wow, that's tiny. And as a result, I still think it's baffling that we can get games like The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt running on such a tiny system, because it is inconceivably small compared to other systems. I think even the 3DS is maybe a bit bigger in terms of its silicon footprint, and that may be an expression I've made up. But I don't want to go on record with that, but I wouldn't be surprised. Let me put it that way.
All right, well, I think we've talked about this for a little while now, but Alex, if you could add any one feature to the Switch, just one, and I guess this goes for the people watching the video, let us know in the comments as well, but what feature would you add?
The ability to record video in The Witcher 3. I suppose just if I can include it as one sort of addition, folders and free organization as an option. I think for many people, just the Switch's current UI is perfectly functional, but for me, I flip between games quite often, so I'd like to just be able to, I want to play Astral Chain, so I go to A, just something like that. Speaking of which, I really need to play Astral Chain, because I haven't done so in ages. What about you? What would you add?
Well, I suppose your one is also quite limited to us, because we have hundreds of games. I'm sure most people watching probably don't, but still, I think that's probably my one too. But just to be different, I'll say some other sort of theme. It doesn't have to be images, but some kind of different colors to choose from. Like having a purple theme, or having a gradient theme, or just something that isn't just the pure white or the pure black. It hurts me. It hurts me to look at that menu and just see two options, and I've been looking at them for almost 4 years now.
The advantage with doing something like that rather than an actual image as well is that they can be generated by the Switch, and as a result can be tiddly tiny instead of being an actual bitmap.
Here's a cool thing they could do too. Like, what if the theme of the console mirrors your Joy-Con? So, like, say you have neon Joy-Con on. One side of it's blue, one side of it's red. It sells the Joy-Con. It sells itself.
It does, rather, and given the fact that, way back when it was discovered, really quite early, that you can essentially assign colors to Joy-Con. It's just a variable factor, and people have hacked in and found out how to do it just over Bluetooth. I did it for myself just to see whether it worked, and it did. So you could, in fact, have a completely custom gradiented theme, but just by altering those factors. Alternatively, Nintendo could just have the option, rather than making people hack their machines. Well, hack their Joy-Con.
That would be nice.
That would be nice.
Well, I guess on that note, the PS5 and Xbox Series X are very exciting systems, and I can't wait to see what more of the UI is available to us once we get our hands on those. But the Switch, in its own bubble, I think we both agree, has its strengths as well. Like, sure, there are features we wish it had, but at the expense of those features are a very fast UI, and even faster than even the Xbox Series X in some instances, like booting back to a game. And that's something that would be lost with a bit of bloat. So thank you all for watching this chat. Let us know what you guys think about the Switch's UI. How do you think it compares to the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5? Do you think it's stronger in areas? Do you think it needs more features? And what feature do you want the most? Thank you so much for watching, and of course be sure to subscribe to Nintendo Life and check out nintendolife.com for a lot more delicious Switch content. We'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.